Hello, this is Dr. Hanaa Assil, and this is paper 1-2 of March 2022 in the IGCSE Chemistry, Cambridge. Let's take a look at the questions and discuss the answers. The first question in this paper was, which change of state is exothermic? Now, let's take a look at the changes of state. You should remember solid to liquid, liquid to gas. All of these you need to give the reaction energy. That means the reaction takes in heat. Solid takes in heat to change to liquid. Liquid takes in heat to change to gas. Sublimation takes in heat for the solid to change to gas. So all of these are endothermic. Now going back, for the gas to become a liquid, it has to cool down. Cool down means the gas gives out heat. So from gas to liquid to solid, it gives out heat. That is exothermic reaction. So the only one that is exothermic in this list is condensation. In which state does 1 decimeter cubed of methane contain the most particles? Okay, if you look at this, we said if I have a solid and a liquid and a gas, and they are all in the same volume. Now, which of these will have more particles? Of course, the solid is the one in which the particles are closely packed, so I can pack in more particles in that volume than for liquids and for gases. Which dye on the chromatogram is a pure substance? We said to be pure, what happens? To be pure, it should give only one spot. So A gives one spot, but the others give more than one spot. That means they are not pure. They have more than one substance. Which piece of apparatus is used to measure exactly 5 centimeter cubed of a liquid? I want you to know that we never use a beaker to measure volume. The only use for a beaker is if I put two substances and allow them to react in the beaker, but we never use it to measure any volume, definitely no volume to accurate measurements. If we're measuring using measuring cylinder, again, remember, measuring cylinder is not accurate. He wants to measure exactly 5.00. You cannot use a measuring cylinder. Remember, we use a measuring cylinder if we're measuring about 5 centimeter cubed, or measure quickly 5 centimeter cubed. But if you want it exactly, do not use a measuring cylinder. Can we use a pipette? He's saying 25 centimeter cube pipette. Remember, a pipette is something that has a mark. So if you fill that the pipette to that mark, it is 25 centimeter cubed. So you cannot use it to measure anything less or anything more. There is no graduation. So the pipette cannot be used. The burette is the one that I can use to measure exactly 5.00 centimeter cubed, because the burette is accurate and it can measure any volumes, 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, whatever. Fermentation of sugar produces a mixture of ethanol and yeast. And he's saying the ethanol is a solution, the yeast is a solid. How is the solid yeast removed from the mixture? Now, if I have a solid and I want to remove it from a mixture, yes, of course, I should use filtration. In that case, the solid will be the one in the filter paper, so that will be the residue. Matter exists as elements, compounds, and mixtures. Which row identifies an element, a compound, and a mixture? Let's take this one by one. How do you answer this kind of questions? We said we look at element. Can it be calcium or brass or calcium or sodium chloride? Of course, an element, we said definition of an element is a substance that contains one type of atoms. So it has to be calcium. So your answer has to be A or C. Brass, you should know, is a mixture of metals, which we call alloy. Sodium chloride is a compound, not an element. So my answer is A or C. So let's take a look. Then my compound would be potassium carbonate or sodium chloride. Well, both of them are okay. Then we look at the mixture. Which of these is a mixture? Is sodium chloride a mixture? No, sodium chloride is a compound. Brass is a mixture. So you choose the one in which all of them are correct. So calcium is an element. Sodium chloride is a compound. Brass is a mixture of metals. Which pair of statements about diamond and graphite is correct? Well, you need to read all the statements and you need to read them from the beginning to the end, and the statement is correct if all of it is correct. So, for example, A says diamond and graphite are both pure carbon. Yes, that is correct. Diamond and graphite are made of carbon. They are both macromolecules. Yes, remember, what does macromolecules mean? It means giant three-dimensional structure that is made up of many atoms. So that is correct. So actually A is correct. Let's take a look at the others. When you find that something is correct, please check that the others are wrong. Diamond and graphite can both be used as electrodes. Is that correct? No, you should know that only graphite can be used as electrodes because graphite is something that can conduct electricity. Diamond does not conduct electricity, so that statement is wrong. Diamond has covalent bonds. Graphite has ionic bonds. No, they're all made of carbon that have covalent bonds between them. So that statement is wrong. Diamond is hard with high melting point. Yes. Graphite is soft with low melting point. No, both of them have high melting points because both of them are macromolecules. An isotope of chromium is represented by this. Which statement about an atom of this isotope of chromium is correct? I want to remind you again, in the periodic table, each element has two numbers. The bigger one we say is the mass number, and that is the number of protons plus neutrons. Now, the smaller one is the atomic number or the number of protons, and this is usually the same as number of electrons if the atom did not lose or gain electrons. So if the atom does not have a positive or a negative on it, then the small number is the number of protons, is the number of electrons. So when he says it contains 24 electrons, that is correct. Sodium is in group 1 of the periodic table. Chlorine is in group 7. I'm going to remind you that in all the exams, you will have a periodic table at the end of your exam. Which row describes what happens when sodium bonds ionically with chlorine? So if we have sodium atom reacting with chlorine, you should remember sodium is in group 1. So it has 1 electron outermost shell. It's going to lose that electron. And when it loses that electron, it will become what? You should realize that it should become positive because now you have more protons than electrons. So I get Na plus. Now the chlorine gains 1 electron because it has 7 electrons in its outermost shell. It needs to gain 1, and when it gains 1, it becomes Cl minus. Caesium fluoride is an ionic compound. Now, which statements about caesium fluoride are correct? Now, when he gives you this, please go one by one and tick which one is correct and which one is wrong. So he's saying something is ionic. It conducts electricity. When solid, will ionic compounds conduct electricity? When solid, no. They conduct electricity when molten or in solution so that I can have free moving ions. It has high melting point. Yes, ionic compounds have high melting point because they are three-dimensional structures with alternating positive and negative ions. It is soluble in water. Yes, we said all ionic compounds are soluble in water. It is highly volatile. We said, what do we mean by volatile? Volatile means it evaporates easily. That means it has low boiling point? No, that's not right. Remember, ionic compounds have high boiling point, so they are not volatile. That means only statement 2 and 3 are correct. That means my answer is C. The structure of a molecule of a compound is shown. What is the formula of this compound? This means you have to just add the number of carbons, the number of hydrogens, the number of oxygens, and he already gives you a key. Even if he does not give you the key, you should know that the one that makes 4 bonds would be the carbon. The one that makes only 1 bond is the hydrogen, and the one that makes 2 bonds is the oxygen. So this compound has C3H8O. Calcium carbonate reacts with dilute hydrochloric acid to produce carbon dioxide gas. The equation for the reaction is shown. The relative formula mass of calcium carbonate is 100. Remember, you're supposed to know how to calculate relative formula mass. Relative formula mass is what we call MR, or molecular mass. So if you count the masses in calcium carbonate, they come up to 100. Now he's saying I have 10 grams of calcium carbonate reacted with excess dilute hydrochloric acid. What would be the mass of carbon dioxide produced? Now, please note how to do this kind of questions for the core subjects for pre-IG grade 9. We said if he gives me the MR, you can see that from the equation, 1 mole or 1 of calcium carbonate gives 1 of carbon dioxide. That means the MR of calcium carbonate would give the MR of carbon dioxide. So if I have 100 grams of calcium carbonate, it will give 44 grams of carbon dioxide. That's the MR of carbon dioxide. So if I have 10 grams, how much should I get? So this is cross multiplication. I get 4.4 grams. Molten sodium chloride and concentrated aqueous sodium chloride are electrolyzed using platinum electrodes. So he's doing electrolysis of these substances. What are the products at the negative electrode in each electrolysis? So if we're doing molten sodium chloride, remember molten sodium chloride will have Na plus and Cl minus. He's saying which one will be formed at the negative. Remember, the one that is positive ion, that is the one that goes to the negative electrode. So I will get sodium. So my answer is C or D. Now, when we're talking about concentrated solution of sodium chloride, I have Na plus and Cl minus. I also have H plus and OH minus from water. Remember, when you do electrolysis, water breaks up into H plus and OH minus. Now I have a choice between Na plus and H plus. Please remember that when you have a choice between Na plus and H plus, it is the H plus that reacts, so I get hydrogen gas at the negative electrode. An object is electroplated with silver using an aqueous silver salt as the electrolyte. So the object to be electroplated will be anode or cathode. Remember, electroplating is when I cover a metal with another metal using electricity. Now I have a spoon, for example, that's my object. And I want to cover it with what? I want to cover it with silver. You should know that silver ions are positive. I want the silver ions to go to the spoon, so the spoon must be negative. So the spoon is cathode. So my answer is C or D. Now, if I'm trying to cover it with silver, then the other electrode is made of silver. If he says he wants to cover it with chromium, then it will be chromium, and so on. Which row describes the changes that occur in an endothermic reaction? Endothermic, what does that mean? We said endothermic reaction is one that takes in heat. It takes in heat from the surroundings. So that means that the temperature of the surroundings decreases. Please note that endothermic takes in heat. It takes it from the surrounding solution. So the surrounding solution will become colder, its temperature will decrease. Which statement about fuels is correct? Let us take each statement. He says heat energy is only produced by burning fuels. That's actually not true. We said, yes, if I burn fuels, it produces energy. But then you should remember that we have uranium-235 that produces energy in nuclear power stations. And you have to remember that uranium-235 is something that gives energy without burning. I don't burn the uranium-235. It gives the energy by a different process, which we call nuclear reactions. So when he says that heat energy is only produced by burning fuels, no, because uranium-235 is a fuel and I don't burn. Hydrogen is used as a fuel, although it is difficult to store. Well, actually, yes, it's difficult to store because it is a gas, but it is used as a fuel. Methane is a good fuel because it produces only water. What is methane? Methane is CH4. If it burns, it gives carbon dioxide and water. So if he says it produces only water, that's wrong. It is hydrogen that produces only water. Uranium is burned. We said no, uranium is not burned. Uranium produces energy by nuclear power in nuclear power stations. A sequence of changes involving sulfur is shown. Which row is the correct description for the change? So changing solid to liquid. We said if we do melting or freezing or condensation or boiling or evaporation, things like that, we're just changing from one state to another. We did not change the substance. So I still have sulfur. Whether it's a solid or a liquid, it's still sulfur. This change is physical. So my answer is C or D. Then change 2, I'm changing sulfur to sulfur dioxide. Well, I changed and I got a different product completely. That is a chemical change. So my answer is C. Magnesium is added to dilute hydrochloric acid. 25 centimeter cubed of gas is given off in the first 30 seconds. The experiment is repeated at lower temperature. Which volume of gas is produced? Remember, lower temperature means the reaction is what? Faster or slower? Lower temperature means reaction is slower. So how much gas would it give? It would probably give less than the 25. So the only option that could be possible is the 15 centimeter cube, because we're doing the reaction at lower temperature. It is slower, so it gives less gas. The equation for the reaction between magnesium and copper 2 oxide is shown. Which substance is oxidized? Of course, oxidized is the one that gained oxygen. So it is the magnesium that gained oxygen. So that's the one that was oxidized. Methyl orange is added to dilute hydrochloric acid and to aqueous sodium hydroxide. What is the color of methyl orange in acid and in base? You know that sodium hydroxide is a base. You have to remember these colors. When you put methyl orange in acid, it is red. In base, it is yellow. So my answer is B. 21. Compound X is dissolved in water and 2 separate samples of the solution are tested. He added aqueous sodium hydroxide and he got white precipitate insoluble in excess. Would that be calcium or zinc? You have to remember, if I add sodium hydroxide and I get white precipitate insoluble in excess, that is calcium, because zinc will give white precipitate soluble in excess. So my answer is A or B. Then he said, acidify with dilute nitric acid and add aqueous silver nitrate. It gave him a yellow precipitate. Which one gives yellow? Iodide. So my answer is calcium iodide. Which statement about the periodic table is correct? Let's take it one by one. Elements with the highest atomic number in each period are metallic. Is that correct? Where do we have metals? Metals are at the beginning of the period in group 1, 2, and 3. So their atomic number is less. So that's not correct. Elements with the lowest group numbers are non-metals. Well, let's take a look. Elements with the lowest group numbers are non-metals. So the ones in group 1 are non-metals? No, that's not right. Elements with similar chemical properties are placed in the same group? Yes. All those in the same group will have similar chemical properties. Elements with similar physical properties are placed in periods? No. That has nothing to do with the period. So remember that the ones on the left, group 1, group 2, up to group 3, all of these are metallic. The ones from group 4, 5, 6, 7, and 0, that is non-metal. Parts of the periodic table is shown which element is soft and reacts violently with cold water. Remember, reacts with cold water, that's a metal. Soft means it has to be in group 1. Group 1 is the one that we said is soft and it reacts violently with cold water. 3 properties of element X are listed. In which part of the periodic table is the element placed? Well, he says it has full outer shell without going on. Full outer shell means it's in what? It's in group 8. And you should know that those in group 8 are monatomic, they are unreactive. So this is group 8. Some properties of the elements in group 7 of the periodic table are shown. Please note the Roman numerals. V represents 5. If I have 2 after the V, then you add them to 5. So that is group 7. Which statement is correct? So going down the group, he says bromine is a brown solid. No, you should know that it's not a solid. Fluorine is actually, you should know, and from the table that he gives you, you should know that if the melting point is -7 and the boiling point is above room temperature, then the bromine is a liquid. And you should also know that bromine is the only liquid non-metal in the periodic table. Fluorine is a pale yellow gas at room temperature. Yes, that is correct, because its boiling point is very low, so that is actually the correct statement. Iodine is a brown liquid. No, you should know that it's a solid. Astatine is a black liquid. No, astatine is a solid. Which process is used to obtain the metal calcium from its ore? Again, we said the method to obtain a metal depends on its reactivity. So anything more reactive than carbon, I get by electrolysis. So calcium, I will get by electrolysis. Anything less reactive than carbon, lower than carbon in the reactivity series, then I can get it by reduction of its oxide. Which row links the property of a metal to its use? So if we look at these aircraft bodies, we need something that is high density. No, we said we use aluminium for aircraft bodies because of low density. Food containers, you need something that's very reactive. No, you need something that will not react with the food. Cooking pans, you need something that is good electrical conductor. No, you need something that is good heat conductor. Now, for electrical wiring, I need something that is ductile. Yes, we said ductile means it can be stretched into wires, so that is correct. The table gives some properties of an element. Which other property does this element have? Well, let's take a look at this element. It has high melting point. Its appearance is gray, and we said gray, that means it's a metal. Appearance of the chloride is blue. That means it forms colored compounds. Density is high. Electrical conductivity when solid is good. So that means it's a metal, and it means that it is a transition metal. Remember, the transition metal is the one that has high melting point, high density, and forms colored compounds. So which other property would apply to transition metals? Remember, transition metals can act as catalysts. A metal reacts vigorously with cold water. That tells us that it is a very reactive metal up in the electrochemical series. Which statement about the metal is correct? It's above hydrogen in the reactivity series. Yes, it has to be above hydrogen in the reactivity series. It is below magnesium. No, because he says it reacts vigorously with cold water. That means it has to be in the reactivity series in group 1 or up to calcium in group 2. So potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium reacts with steam, not cold water. So Below magnesium? No, it's oxide. So actually the statement that is correct is 1. The only one that is correct is 1. It's above hydrogen reactivity series. If he says it's oxide can be reduced with carbon, no, we said to be reduced with carbon, it has to be below carbon. It does not react with acids, no. If it reacts vigorously with cold water, that means it is more reactive than hydrogen. That means it would react with acids. Which row describes the color changes when water is added to anhydrous cobalt chloride and anhydrous copper sulfate? Remember that these are the chemical tests for water. If I add water to anhydrous cobalt chloride, it turns from what to what? From blue to pink. If I add water to anhydrous copper sulfate, it turns from white to blue. So my answer is A. The gases produced by a burning fuel are passed through solution Z using the apparatus shown. The fuel contains compounds of sulfur. Remember that if we have a fuel that contains compounds of sulfur, when I burn it, it gives sulfur dioxide. So which row identifies solution Z? Which solution do we use to test for sulfur dioxide? Remember that we use acidified potassium permanganate. If I use acidified potassium permanganate, then it will turn from purple to colorless. So it turns colorless. If we test the sulfur dioxide gas with litmus, which we could do, we could say insert damp litmus, but you should know that sulfur dioxide gas is an acidic gas. It doesn't bleach the litmus. Remember, the only one that bleaches the litmus is chlorine gas. And it will not turn it blue because it's an acidic gas, so it will actually turn it red. So the only correct answer is A. Which information about carbon dioxide and methane is correct? You should remember that both carbon dioxide and methane are greenhouse gases. Now, which one is formed when vegetation decomposes? Remember, it is methane that is formed from decomposition of vegetation or breakdown of dead plants. Which one is present in normal unpolluted air? Remember that normal unpolluted air contains carbon dioxide. Which one is produced during respiration? Also carbon dioxide, not methane. So my answer is B. Which row identifies uses of sulfur? Remember, sulfur is used to make what? It's not used to make ammonia. Remember, it is nitrogen that we use to make ammonia. So the sulfur is used to make sulfuric acid. So my answer is B or C. Now, what are the uses of sulfur dioxide? Remember, we said sulfur dioxide can be used for bleaching wood pulp or as food preservative. We do not use sulfur dioxide as a fertilizer. The one that we use for fertilizer is ammonia or ammonium salts. Which statements about lime are correct? Do you remember what is lime? The first statement here says lime is made by heating calcium carbonate. Yes, you should know that calcium carbonate is limestone. When I heat it, it gives calcium oxide, and calcium oxide is lime. Lime is used to desulfurize flue gases. Remember, what are flue gases? They are the waste gases that come out of factories. Usually these would have sulfur dioxide gas, which causes acid rain. So I want to remove that before the gases go into the air. So that is what we mean by desulfurized flue gases. You should know that sulfur dioxide is acidic. So if I want to neutralize it, I should put a base. Calcium oxide is a base. Lime is used to treat alkaline soil. No, it is used to treat what? It is used to treat acidic soil. The chemical name for lime is calcium oxide. Yes, that is correct. So my answers are 1, 2, and 3. So that is, 1, 2, and 4. So that is B. Which structure is correctly named? Okay, let's take a look at A. Is A ethanoic? No, you should realize that A has 3 carbons. So this should be propanoic acid. B, is B ethene? No, you should realize that ene means it has a double bond. This is not ene, this is ane. This is ethane. What about C? He says this is ethanol. Yes, actually that is ethanol. Eth means it has two carbons. Ol means it has OH, so that is correct. What about D? Propane. No, this is something that has a double bond, so this should actually be propene. The fractional distillation of petroleum produces a series of fractions with different uses. Remember, you are supposed to know the order of the fractions that come out from fractional distillation of petroleum and the use for each fraction. So which of these is correct? If you look at the uses, you will find that naphtha, yes, is used for making chemicals, but the others are wrong. Ethene and propene are both members of the same homologous series. Which statements explain why ethene and propene have similar chemical properties? So they have similar chemical properties because what? Because they're both hydrocarbons? No, it's not because they're both hydrocarbons, and it's not because they're both made by cracking. It is because they have the same functional group. Remember, if we say members of the same homologous series have similar chemical properties, this is because they have the same functional group. Which statement about ethane is correct? Remember, ethane is an alkane. It decolorizes bromine water? No, it is the alkene that decolorizes bromine water. It burns in excess oxygen to form water and carbon dioxide. That is correct. Remember, all alkanes, alkenes, and alcohols actually would burn in excess oxygen to form water and carbon dioxide. Its molecular formula is C2H4? No, C2H4 is an alkene. Its atoms are joined together by ionic? No, all of these are joined by covalent bonds. Which statements about ethanol are correct? Ethanol is used as a solvent. You should know that ethanol is used as a solvent. Ethanol can be made directly from ethane. How do we make ethanol? We said we make it from ethene, not ethane. Ethanol is covalent. Yes, of course, ethanol is covalent. So 1 and 3, so that is C. Last question. Polymers are long chain molecules made from small molecules linked together. 4 polymers or types of polymers are listed. Which polymers or type of polymers are synthetic? Remember, we have natural polymers, and the natural ones are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. The synthetic are nylon and terylene, so that is D. Okay, I hope you were able to get all of this correct and understand the answers. Thank you for listening.